Unturned is presented by UpdateAI.
That broad set of sort of like understanding my customer, who is the brand or the merchant, but also understanding their customer, who is the end consumer, I think is a really cool thing that we have the ability to do because we can actually put ourselves into someone's shoes as a consumer. Whereas
how do you think you developed that? How did you develop that sensibility for your customers, their needs, and their customers' needs? How long do you think that took? Like, what was the process of doing that? Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Unturned. I'm your host, Josh Schachter. I have with me a very special guest, and I always say that, but I really mean that this time. He's laughing at me right now. He's in his mind, he's thinking, this is so fucking cheesy, Josh. You're such a fucking cheeseball. But my friend of 10 years, I think, Mr. Rohan Shah. Rohan is I'm blanking for a second, Rohan, because I know you're the Chief Revenue Officer at Extend. And Rohan and I, we go way back. Rohan, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah. So tell us.
Your cheesiness.
I know. This is either going to be like the best episode that I've recorded or the worst. I don't know which way it's going to go. It's either going to be like the most like just authentic and like get raw and like real good lessons come out of it, or it's just going to be knuckleheads, or it's just going to be awkward because we're trying to keep a straight face. We'll see what happens here. But to get things on the right track, tell everybody listening a little bit about Extend.
Yeah, for sure. So thank you for having me on. It's fun, full circle, being able to do a podcast with you 10 years after working together at BCG. But
you'd rather have the half hour back. Let's not lie. There's no reason to do the cordial stuff, right? That's okay.
That's okay. I like you though. So Extend. So yeah, I'm one of the founders of Extend, our Chief Revenue Officer. We started the company about 6 years ago, and our real focus, I don't come from a retail background, nor do I come from an insurance background, but I'm a consumer. And so we were really looking at the retail market as consumers and trying to understand, A, what was going on. Retail has gone through 4 or 5 different lives in the past sort of 6 to 10 years. So A, what's going on, and B, what are the litany of solutions or providers or companies or startups that are out there that are trying to solve problems in retail. And so, I lived in San Francisco at the time, and I had friends that worked at companies like Stripe who made accessing the payment gateways easy. I had companies who worked at friends who worked at companies like Affirm and Klarna and Afterpay who took, what you and I call layaway.
Bro, what do you do? What do you do? You're going straight into the narcissistic. Let me tell you my whole fucking story. Give me the one-liner. What does Extend do? And then we can reverse and do the genesis of it.
We build software for retailers to help them make more money and reduce cost in the post-purchase experience.
Perfect. You sat on my couch like 7 years ago, 6.5 years ago in Santa Monica. And you were telling me about this thing that you were like 90% in, or maybe you had just given your commitment to it. And I actually don't even remember what it was that you were describing, but just like your energy and like the narrative that you told was really compelling. Again, I don't remember what that narrative was, but like, it's like, fuck, like Rohan's really into this. And like, he's telling a really compelling story about the problems that people are facing. So retell that story. Like, what did you guys really start to capture and create value out of?
Oh, that was the story I was trying to tell you before you cut me off.
I know, but it was taking too long. Go straight to it.
Yeah, long story short, retail is a hard business. And what we found is that the most successful retailers, take the top 1% of retailers, Walmart, Costco, Amazon, Wayfair, Best Buy, you name it, the way they made a lion's share of their profits was through services, right? So you sort of sit back and ask yourself, like, what are services? When you go on Amazon and you check out for any electronic product, you get offered an extended warranty. When you go to Best Buy, some of those annoying guys in blue shirts come hound you and try to sell you an extended warranty. Now, I didn't love the way that industry worked previously. But when I took a step back and thought about why don't I love it, it's because the customer experience was shit. You spend all this money on a new product, you buy that insurance plan or extended warranty protection plan, hoping that if something goes wrong, you'll get taken care of. 2 years down the line, something finally goes wrong. And then they make you wait on hold for 45 minutes. And then they make you jump through hoops. And then they make you share a paper receipt, which I've never kept for the last
They hope that you've forgotten about it or can't find your warranty policy. They basically hope that it's...
Their goal is to avoid you, right? Yeah. And that's their business model. And so the way we really looked at it was, A, why is it only the top 1%? There's a ton of other brands, and e-commerce had proliferated, obviously, especially over the last 5 to 7 years. why are all of these other companies not taking advantage of this opportunity to make more money, right? Take a company like Best Buy when you talk about Geek Squad. Best Buy did $40 billion in volume, about $1.6 billion in profit, and 52% of that came from extended warranties.
That's crazy.
52% of that.
That's like airlines making all their profit on baggage.
Yeah, or travel insurance, right?
Yeah.
So it's highly profitable, but you need to deliver value if there's a product that someone's buying. And so that was our whole thing, is make it accessible. That's a distribution play through technology.
Well, it's value, but also probably like operationally, if you're not a Best Buy, if you're not a $1 billion company or multi-billion dollar, it's probably hard to just like to get off the ground. It's a big lift, right? So I assume that journey is on both sides.
Yes, it was when legacy insurance companies were the only people supporting these programs in the market. And this is what I was mentioning earlier before you cut me off, but like Firm and Afterpay, right? Like they took what we called layaway when we were growing up. It wasn't a new product. It just wasn't a sexy thing that you and I would talk about leveraging. And they turned it into this easy to access, customer focused, modern feeling brand that was really just an API at the end of the day, right? With a lot of credit and underwriting and whatnot on the back end. Yeah. That's what we did for extended warranties to start, is make it easy to access and treat customers the way that, you as a brand would want to treat your own customers. So we become an extension of these brands and help them make a lot more money in the process. Yeah.
Now, when you started this, you're the CRO. You were also the SDR when you started this, right?
I still am.
You still are. By the way, this is no lie. Rohan yesterday sends me a text message. Hey, can you help me get in front of so-and-so? It's an SMB deal, but I'd really love their contact. And was super gung-ho, even though I barely knew the guy from 10 years earlier. But he's still like doing the heavy lifting. I want to talk to you about that in a minute. It's like this roll up the sleeves mentality that you've always brought. Like you always bring the force compared to all the rest of your generation. And I can say that being an older brother to you. But we'll talk more about where that came from. So I got stuck in my rant. Okay. So you go to companies in your current role or 6 years ago, and you say, here's the Best Buy thing. Half their profits came from services. We're going to print you free money. We are going to help you operationalize this in a lower lift way than otherwise you would. And we're going to give a better customer experience to your customers so that, like, yes, maybe they are taking advantage more of what they purchased as opposed to just kind of, but it's going to be a good experience for them too. Okay. So are you a good salesperson, or is that just like a slam dunk value prop?
It's a good value proposition, right? I mean, I think hopefully most businesses out there want to make more money. So I think that's something that we lean on for sure. But I do think the sales pitch that we have, if you throw numbers in front of someone, sure, like that's interesting. Tell me more. There's concerns, right? At the end of the day, like these are their customers, not ours. We're not paying a bunch of marketing dollars to get someone to a website. The brand is. And so the way I look at it is it's actually more important to build trust. Like, how are you building trust? The business case is there. Every other provider in the market will show a similar business case. That's the reality, right? It is incremental revenue and high margin revenue. The flip side is how do you build trust? We build trust in a couple of different ways. One is from a relationship perspective. So you ask, am I a good salesperson? I'm not a great technical salesperson. I haven't been brought up in sales organizations. I never got trained on MedPick, you name it.
But you've got charisma is where you're going with this. Yeah.
I've learned how to build relationships, and I've learned how to empathize with the person on the other side of the table. And that empathy comes from me having a broader breadth of experience and skill sets than most salespeople do. I worked under you in product, right? So I was writing JIRA tickets and requirements and working with engineers and stuff that I wasn't very good at, but I could get by and I could learn. So like having the product background, having a finance background through, my family and our investments and looking at some of the things that we do on that end helped me talk the talk with a CFO. So here I am, and I can sit in a room with a CEO, have one conversation, a CFO have a different conversation, a CMO have a different conversation, and a chief product officer, and tell the same fundamental story, but in 4 different ways that resonates with each of those individuals because I have a sense for what they care about. That for me is like my superpower from a sales perspective. I don't follow the frameworks and methodologies the same way. And I'm a ball of ADD, so I'm not great at that stuff. But what I've found is that you need the relationship side of it and you need to build trust. And like many of these folks who work with us, I consider friends now. And that's not conniving or malicious. That's because I love learning about their businesses too. And I like that I can help them grow their business.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's actually one of the really nice things about founding a company is that you become like really close and friends with your customers. Actually, in some of my customers, I don't even know a thing about their business. I only just really care about them personally. I'm being totally honest with you.
One of our customers last night, right? And we probably talked about work for 30 seconds over the course of a 2.5-hour dinner. And I love that's just enough to expense it. That's it.
So, so Ro, what were some of the objections that you had to handle earlier on?
Extended warranties are slimy, first and foremost, right? Like most people have had a bad experience around extended warranties. There's a reason why the industry on a whole, we look at attach rates, right? What percentage of customers buy that extended warranty? Attach rates were going down. Customers were losing faith. They were losing trust in the actual services that were being provided. So first and foremost is when you're selling to an executive, typically someone who makes more money than most. Look, if you have a lot of money, if my cell phone breaks, guess what? I'm lucky enough I can buy a new one. I don't need to buy Apple Care every single time. Right. So you have to change the story for folks in those positions where now I lean more into convenience at times. Guess what? When this breaks, I don't know where to go. What shop do I go to? Who do I talk to? So I buy Apple Care because I can make one call and they're going to send me a replacement. It's convenience for me. It has nothing to do with cost. Whereas when we go to Advance Auto Parts, who's one of our customers, and talk to them about their customers, they're like, a lot of our customers can't afford a new battery for their car. This is not a decision point that they have that's an easy one. This is an investment they're making. And so that broad set of sort of like understanding my customer, who is the brand or the merchant, but also understanding their customer, who is the end consumer, I think is a really cool thing that we have the ability to do because we can actually put ourselves into someone's shoes as a consumer. Whereas
how do you think you developed that? How did you develop that sensibility for your customers, their needs, and their customers' needs? How long do you think that took? Like, what was the process of doing that?
I mean, frankly speaking, it's like give a shit. And if you give a shit, you'll actually take the time to go read and learn and digest. And, I follow 8 different retail publications that I get emails from every single day or every single week. I read through all of them. Some of them are about job transitions in retail. That's my BD mind going to work. Some of them are about trends and what retailers are thinking about. I want to read what the CEO of a large retailer is reading, right? Like I try to be them in terms of what are they going to care about. And that means I should care about it. So there's reading and learning and just training and educating yourself to an extent. 2 is your network. Who are you surrounding yourself with? It's a lot faster to learn from someone who can teach it to you in 20 minutes versus you reading 5 different books on it, right? So I'm lazy in that sense. I like to find the fastest path to getting something done, and getting it done well enough doesn't need to be perfect. So I think people is a huge piece of it. The people you surround yourself with, that could be your board, right? From a board of directors perspective, that could be advisors that you have. That could be
so who did you surround yourself with earlier?
Very early on in our companies, very early on for Extend, I built out an advisor network, right? And so these were long-standing retailers, folks who had spent 20, 25 plus years in retail. This
was Rohan's personal advisor network, or this is Extend's, or both? Both. Yeah.
Both. I mean, the advisor network was managed by me. It was
you were the company at that point. I get it, but yeah. But this wasn't. Hey, help me learn about the industry. This is, hey, we have this company. We want to learn about our customer needs. I want to create this network for that.
And you understand the pain points of the people that we're selling to, right? How can I make you be valuable while driving value to those customers, and in the process generating some revenue for us too?
Yeah.
So I mean,
go ahead.
People, content, and education, and then giving a shit. Honestly, because at the end of the day, if you know this, you're a better product person than I am. Like if you're focused on your business case when building a feature and not on value for the end consumer or the end user or whoever they are, probably not going to reach the business case that you've set out for, right? Like you got to focus on the customer.
Hey everybody, it's Josh. I'm taking a quick break from the podcast to tell you a bit about UpdateAI. I started UpdateAI to solve 2 major challenges for CS teams. The first is that we save CSMs 4 to 5 hours per week with our productivity through AI. Secondly, we give leaders a window into all the conversations across each account and the entire portfolio. So we help knowledge transfer, we help increase the coverage model of your CS teams, And we help you detect emerging patterns in what your customers are telling your CSMs across all the risks, product feedback, advocacy moments, and expansion opportunities. So come check us out at www.updateai. It's completely free to sign up and trial. Let's talk about giving a shit. You've always given a lot of shits. When you worked with me at BCG, you gave a lot of shits. You've always had that drive in you. And clearly you still have that drive and passion. Some people don't. It's tough to like build an organization. How big are you guys right now?
240 people-ish, 230.
240 people. How many people underneath you in your org?
70, 80.
Okay, cool. So like at some point, it's hard to just cherry pick people who give the biggest shit. How do you find that drive to mimic your own? Because I could almost imagine that it's virtually impossible probably to find somebody that can keep up with you. And yet, from where I sit as a smaller startup, I only want to work with people like you. So
Yeah.
How'd you go about doing that?
Look, at your stage, you can only work with people like that.
Yeah.
That's the reality. And like giving a shit comes both in the form of personality and personal characteristics. It also comes in the form of upside. Like that's the reality, right? And so early days, guess what? You got to give people really strong upside. Otherwise, why will they give a shit? Is sort of the reality. So it comes in both forms and fashions, and I think both are important to consider. But at your stage, they have to be those people, right? They have to be people who are not only willing, but capable of wearing 5 different hats on any given day and spanning across finance and product and engineering and whatever that may be on a given day. Actually, a lot of similar skill sets that I think CSMs need to have, frankly, for the type of role that they have. But we can talk about that later. So I think at your stage, you have to. At 200 plus people, it's impossible. You can't have 200 bulls in a china shop like myself. Like it actually doesn't work as well when you do that. And there are more processes. I don't want to call them bureaucracy, but you need process, right? Otherwise, things go completely haywire. You can't run around like a chicken with its head cut off, which I have in the past as much. So I think
who keeps your process? Who keeps your process?
You asked that question because you know it's not me.
Well, I do know it's not you, but maybe it is. I don't know, but
no, I mean,
no.
I have partners, right? Like one of my colleagues, Rob, like he is very good from an internal operations, internal process perspective and more. And guess what? He knows I'm really damn good getting out into the field and getting in front of customers. So like you surround yourself with people that are good at the shit that you're not good at, right? If you're hiring people that look exactly like you all the time, you're probably not going to be successful in the long run. You need that diversity of skill sets and diversity of perspectives to really build something really unique. So it's surrounding yourself with those people, but recognizing that like an IC on XYZ team at the company who's 2 years into their career, I don't expect them to give a shit in the same way that I do. This is my baby. I started it. I have way more upside. I don't expect them to give a shit the same way I do, but I do expect them to put a bunch of fucking work and effort in. And if they don't care about their work product the way that I give a shit about the company at large, it's not going to work out. Go work at Google. Spend 30 hours a week working and go home and have your great work-life balance. There's nothing wrong with that. This is not the fucking place for that.
How do you manage that
really quickly?
How do you monitor and manage that at larger scale?
Leaders. The onus goes from me when we were 30 people to the leaders that I have on my team. And they are not going to be perfect. It's really hard to hire. You know this, right? It's not an easy exercise, especially when you can't pay the same thing that larger companies can pay. So people aren't going to be perfect. I'm definitely not perfect in that regard, but you manage it through your leadership. Like this is where management layers below sort of the founding or executive team are crucial and fundamental. And like that's the success. That's the layer that drives the success of the business from growth stage to beyond.
I guess the question is really, so I get it, leaders, right? You grow and so does the function. How are you creating the culture for those leaders to be successful in measuring it? Yeah.
It's hard. I mean, we were a company that grew up during COVID, right? I mean, we started this company a year before the pandemic hit. So we had what I would call an extremely strong culture prior to the pandemic because we were all in person. We were in the office. We would go get beers after work. We would tap each other on the shoulders. So I think during the pandemic, we had to shift our culture quite a bit, right, to support this new world and new way of thinking. We also grew a ton during that time. So we were hiring mostly remote. So it's hard. I do think people were understanding of the fact that it is a different environment and I'm not going to get the same sort of cultural elements out of my job that I may be used to. But then we had to shift out of that too, right? Like as an example, my sales teams are in the office most days. Why? Because they learn a hell of a lot faster. Why? Because the social part of work is more important in those realms. So there's a number of reasons. So like, I don't look at culture as like a static thing. It has to be a living and breathing object that sort of changes based on where you're at as a business too.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a great answer for you, but it's one of the things where you have to hire people that sort of understand and agree and align on where you want to go, right? Like we're not a company like Facebook who talks about like we're a family and we all love each other. Like, no, you're a colleague of mine. I love my sister and my mom and my dad and other people, right? Like we don't need to love each other. We need to work together. We need to respect each other. And then at the end of the day, go hang out with the people that you like a hell of a lot more than me. And that's totally fine. Right. So like, I think we take a more, what I would call an adult and realistic approach towards this is a job. No one woke up thinking, God, I fucking love extended warranties. That's all I want to do for the rest of my life. It's a product. It's a service. It delivers value and it drives revenue. Right. And that's how companies are built, in my opinion.
Let's shift over to sales and post-sales. So as you know, a large part of our audience is customer success. This is the revenue segment of our series Unchurned, but generally we speak to customer success leaders. Do you own customer success post-sales as CRO?
Yes, I do. So we have, our business is unique, but we have a couple different teams. We have what we call growth strategy managers. So those are effectively CSMs, AMs, if you will, in a traditional SaaS sense. But they own the relationship with a given merchant after that merchant goes live with our solution or our platform. We have technical account managers that handle sort of onboarding and integration as well. But our GSMs are really the spindle, if you will, or air traffic control, because we have 5 different cross-functional teams on the back end that also support our merchants. But we don't need those teams interfacing with our clients. So we have a growth strategy manager team. We also have a field operations team. So why? We work with companies like Mattress Firm that has 2,500 retail locations. I can't have each of my growth strategy managers having to get out into the field. That's also not their core competency.
You mean physically going to stores?
Correct. Doing trainings, handling marketing, helping educate trainees and associates, building out learning management systems so that we can do virtual trainings. Like,
because they have to know what the heck this extend policy is that they're trying to sell.
And if they don't, my numbers get affected, right? So like performance is directly impacted by that. So we have a few different teams. Those like store operations folks is what we call them, do some of the same things that GSMs do when it comes to reporting. Client needs some reporting. They'll help with pushing that out to them when it comes to training, stuff like that. But it is really important to have people that reflect the people on the ground for those store operations roles. So those are folks that worked in retail, that have retail backgrounds, that managed stores previously, versus our GSMs are much more technology capable, if you will. Not that the other folks aren't, but their skill sets and their backgrounds lend itself more towards, understanding how to put in product requests, submitting bugs to the relevant engineering and technical teams, getting reports driven out by our analytics groups, coming up with ideas on how we can grow revenue strategically for an account, et cetera.
And what's the ultimate metric that they're driving towards in post-sales?
Net revenue growth. So on an
NRR
account level, we basically look at annualized forecasts on each of our clients. Again, we're not a SaaS business in the traditional sense. It's not like sign a contract and pay us $150,000 this year. It's consumption based. And so they're looking at each of our clients, modeling out what their performance looks like, looking at their 10Ks, their earnings, et cetera, which informs our forecast. And then we create what we call growth initiatives, which are opportunities to drive growth within that account. And it's their job to then go execute against those initiatives. And so they're measured by performance against those initiatives, effectively like a quota for a sales team.
When you look at the orchestration of your team between sales and post-sales and the different sub-functions, what are some of the biggest gaps that you see in those functions?
I mean, for us, and my team knows that I would say this, is communication. Those teams are not co-located across sales and growth strategy managers or field operations for that matter. Sales is largely co-located in San Francisco. The rest are largely remote. So communication is the biggest gap. communication.
What does that mean?
Yeah, lack of communication breeds friction, right? So I'll make up an example that probably has happened, which is sales team closes a deal. Merchant then goes live, right? They got to integrate with our platform, and then it's handed over to the GSMs. Something goes wrong on the GSM side. It's easy for a sales rep to say, what the fuck? Like, why aren't they doing this correctly? Do they not understand it? It's easy for the GSM side to say, why did the sales team never give me any of this like knowledge? Like, why was the KT or the knowledge transfer didn't include context on XYZ part of their business? That's a lack of communication that breeds friction, right? Salespeople are comped also on those deals growing over time. So there is a responsibility across both parties, and there's compensation up at play as it relates to that. So like communication for me is the biggest one. I'm hosting an all revenue event in San Francisco in January, specifically to help build stronger relationships so that people are communicating without us having to manufacture those environments for them to communicate, right? So I think communication is a big one. I'd say the other one is, to what you guys are doing is tools. Tools can be great at times. They can also be really negative at times, in my opinion, if they're not set up really well. I think in 2021, every software company out there was buying tools like it was no one's fucking business. And I think people started to realize that more tools is not more better,
Right.
And so I think tools is another really important piece of setting a vision and understanding where you want to get to, and then having the tools be supporting mechanisms to help you get there. Versus I think a lot of people evaluate tools in a vacuum and are looking at specific insular point solutions when a team's workflow spans across multiple tools, right? My GSM team, similar to customer success, my GSM team is working in Salesforce. They're also working in Tableau, doing all the reporting. They're also working in Jira, submitting in tickets, right? You don't need to throw more tools at that problem in all situations unless there's a real critical reason for why you're doing that. So I would say tools is the other. I don't know if it's a gap necessarily, but it's
You're saying just
about.
consolidation of tools. Just don't have so many swivel seats of things that you're working on. One single pane of glass to the extent possible.
Or find the right tools to solve for pain points that you actually have that are going to deliver value.
So what are the tools that are solving for the most critical pain points for you?
Yeah, there's a few. I think one solution we had, if I'm being super candid, was actually reducing the amount of tools. Like what we were finding is people were.
Well, that's what it sounded. That's what you were saying, right? Yeah. Less.
Yeah.
Less
So it wasn't
more.
one specific tool that was actually helpful. It was cleaning up the workflow for a lot of our folks who were like, I can't go to 9 different places to figure out where this information is. So by cleaning up the tools, we were able to consistently have the data that they were looking for, the information that they were looking for in a cleaner set of sort of objects or Salesforce or whatever that may be. I think is one thing that we've done. I think another thing that we've done is realizing that when we were all in the office, I could grab someone and tell them, come sit in this room and hear me do this pitch. Just listen, be a fly on the wall. That's hard, right? When you're in a remote world, you can give people homework, whether they listen to it, how much they digest it, all of those are question marks. And so, we use things like call recordings as a really good training tool, as an example. And then we'll have managers actually jump in and ask questions.
But you don't use UpdateAI because I tried to sell it to you years ago, Rohan, and you had another one, and then you renewed on me. And now I'm waiting for February 2025 to hit up your boy. Don't worry, it's coming. Yep, there you go. Put a Salesforce task in there. Yeah, no, it's fine. I'm going to cut you off on that because I like cutting you off, and we talked enough about tools, and we're going over time here. Last thing I want to ask you again for the CS folks that are listening to this podcast. What do you think is the biggest way that CS, or one of the biggest ways CS can be helpful towards sales?
Voice of the customer.
Voice of the customer. How so?
Our product is a unique one, and I actually love this about it because I think it makes it more complicated, and you can learn more about the other business that you're supporting. But our product's complicated. Like, we sell to business decision makers. We sell to folks who are looking at the P&L and want to drive revenue and looking for opportunities to do so. As soon as that deal signs, it gets handed over to e-commerce teams, to operations teams, to marketing teams who were involved in the sales cycle, but it wasn't necessarily their call to make, if you will, right? And so there's a dynamic process, I think, across sales and CS, which is you understand on the sales side how to get a deal done and what maybe the executive level business decision makers want to see or want to grow within their business. And then you have the needs of other teams when it gets handed over, right? Typically, the primary contact or stakeholder for our GSM team is not the person that ran the sales cycle, as an example. And so for me, voice of the customer beyond the sales cycle is super fundamental. It's actually what's informed our roadmap from an extend perspective, is hearing about customers bitch to us about what we're not doing, right? That's exactly what should be informing your roadmap. I'm not smart enough to come up with every feature myself. I'm not very smart, period, as you know. But like the reality is you need that voice of the customer. I think what many companies don't do well, and we're okay, good maybe, but not perfect or great by any stretch. What a lot of companies don't do well is they only look to sales for the voice of the customer, because sales teams are louder and sales teams get a lot of attention, which right? And yet I think a lot of the voice of the customer comes from the people who are like day-to-day operational within the actual product set itself. And that's customer success or growth strategy in our situation. And so I think voice of the customer is the most important one. And then how do you actually capture that and document it and sanitize it into a way where it's digestible?
I could not agree more, Rohan. I didn't pay you to say that, but you hit all the talking points for me. So I appreciate it. And stop with the fake humility and like, I'm not that smart. You were working for me when you were 24, 25. I remember saying to you, and you probably remember this too, within 6 months of working with us together, I said, I will be working for you very shortly from now. And I still hold that to be true. But keep crushing it, man.
Are all full of shit, though. You know that.
Well, but I wasn't, and you weren't, and that's why we're no longer consultants. So do me a favor. I'm very proud for you, seriously, to see the path that you've been on, to see your growth. You've grown up, kid. But keep on crushing it. Keep on building the unicorn to even higher heights. Really proud of you. And thanks for sharing the story for Extend. It was really interesting, and I think a lot of people are going to get a lot of value from the conversation.
Yep. Happy to help, my man. Thank you for having me on.